The president spoke to the United Nations today and sought again to explain his America First views to the rest of the world and to outline threats as he sees them. But as Nick Schifrin reports from the UN, Mr. Trump's U.S. above all philosophy was being challenged repeatedly by other leaders.
President Trump walked into a room he once chastised as a club where people have a good time and rejected the UN's internationalism for renewed nationalism.
Sovereign and independent nations are the only vehicle where freedom has ever survived, democracy has ever endured, or peace has ever prospered.
But among the world's highest level gathering of leaders, what President Trump calls sovereignty has been deeply unpopular. He pulled out of the Paris Climate Agreement signed by 196 countries. He pulled out of the Iran nuclear deal negotiated with Europe. And over Arab and European objections, he moved the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem. The president calls those decisions achievements, but they got him off to an inauspicious start.
In less than 2 years, my administration has accomplished more than almost any administration in the history of our country.
Someone in the audience yells something and laughs.
So true. Didn't expect that reaction, but that's okay.
But President Trump was unapologetic and repeatedly defended his worldview.
We reject the ideology of globalism, and we embrace the doctrine of patriotism.
It was left to Europe to defend multilateralism. French President Emmanuel Macron spoke for nearly 40 minutes and called President Trump's reference to sovereignty a veil for unilateralism.
It leads directly to the isolationism and to conflict, generalized clashes, men against men. Do not accept the erosion of multilateralism. Don't accept our history unraveling. I'm not getting used to this, and I'm not turning my head to it. Our children are watching.
Macron received an extended ovation, as did UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres, who warned against what he called authoritarianism and implicitly criticized President Trump's policy of separating children at the U.S. border.
Those who see their neighbors as dangerous may cause a threat where there was none. Those who close their borders to regular migration only fuel the work of traffickers.
The Iranian regime robs its own people to pay for death and destruction abroad.
Across town, the U.S.'s top diplomat and national security advisor appeared before a group that's advocated for Iranian regime change. The U.S. is pursuing a pressure campaign against Iran that's driven Iran's currency to record lows and flooded currency exchanges. Iran is also coping with protests by Iranians criticizing government corruption. Today, President Trump suggested he was forcing Iran to negotiate.
Iran is a much different country today than it was a year ago. I think that at some point, we will have meaningful discussions and probably do a deal. I don't see how it works for them otherwise.
Europeans are meeting with Iran to try and get around U.S. sanctions. But many companies, including European Airbus, have pulled out of Iran. And today, Iran's president, Hassan Rouhani, rejected dialogue with the U.S.
It's ironic that the U.S. does not even conceal its plan for overthrowing the same government it invites to talks. On what basis and criteria can we enter into a negotiation with such a government?
All day, President Trump did the rounds and gave toasts to the UN. But he did not spare his criticism, including against historic U.S. allies. He says rip off the U.S. on trade and defense.
We defend many of these nations for nothing.
And foreign aid.
Moving forward, we are only going to give foreign aid to those who respect us and, frankly, are our friends.
The Western Europeans, the Canadians, the UN itself will continue to talk about multilateralism. But their leaders have continuously failed to convince President Trump to change course. And they admit they can't preserve what's been called the Western liberal order on their own without the U.S. And so the best thing they could do is buy time, as the U.S. focuses on what it calls sovereignty. Judy?
Nick Schifrin, we thank you.